Uh, my name is Andrea Polk. I am the Children's System of Care Administrator here at Aetna Better Health of Kentucky. We appreciate you joining us again for our Autism Provider Training Series for the spring. We had such a great turnout last year that we wanted to offer it again this year. Just a few housekeeping reminders. Everybody is muted, and this training is being recorded. We are recording it, and then KATC will be uploading it to their YouTube page so that you all can reference it again in the future. Um, the other housekeeping that I want to take care of is that we will have an evaluation posted in the chat more towards the end of the training. You will need to complete this to be able to get CEU credit. You will need to mark that this was part of the Aetna series because it will then prompt you to put your name and email, and that is how we are going to know to send you the CEUs. With that being said, we are very excited to have Enid Hurtado, who is a field training coordinator with Kentucky Autism Training Center. And Enid's going to be discussing creating a bridge to understanding visual supports.
Hello, everyone. I hope that you can see me through the camera, waving at you. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for that introduction. We are going to try a unique way of fielding questions in addition to the chat today. It also will help me to collect some information. So some of you may see the chat from Teams. There's a link inside of there. If you go ahead and click on the link, there's going to be a couple of questions for you to answer so that I will learn more about you and why you're attending this session. I also put some instructions on the screen. If any of you have used the Mentimeter before, then you're familiar with how this works. But basically, you can use, if you want to use your phone, you can use your phone to use that QR code to access the questions. Also, if you're just more comfortable typing it into a URL, a different window, you can do that too. Just make sure you put that number right in there. If you're just joining us and you're not really sure what I'm talking about, don't worry, just look at your chat window, click on that link, and then answer some questions. Know that everything is anonymous. We will all see the results of this, but we will not know who wrote what. So please be honest so that I know what's in your mind in attending this session, and so that I can focus it to meet your needs and answer your questions. Also know that this information will be on every slide that I show. So if you're late to joining this, don't worry. All right, and with that said, let's look at our let's look at our results just so that we can see who's here and what they'd like to know. Okay, as the first one pops up, you can see the information is still there. Okay, so this is a word cloud. So it's all your answers, and you see it moving around. You see that some words are larger than others. So for any of you who are new to this, basically the word that's the largest, or the words that are larger than others, are the ones that people have put more, like there's more responses of it. But a lot of times when you look at this, though, you see that there are synonyms of or similar titles or words to the larger ones. But it looks like we have a lot of different types of therapists and support service providers for all the individuals on the spectrum, and probably a lot more than that. Okay, so thank you so much. This helps me understand who is on this presentation. For the next question, because you should be able, let's see, what ages do we work with? So, we have a lot of people who are working with all the different populations. It looks like we have a lot also K through 12 who work with kids who are in school. We have a few that are early ed and a few that are in toddlers. So great, that helps me, and that also will help me make sure that you have the right resources leaving this presentation, and as well as the adults too. So thank you all for being here. Okay, next one. So yes, I wanted to know, in addition to autism, because nobody just works only with autism, who else are you supporting out there? Okay, so it looks like a lot of intellectual disabilities, ADHD, and of course there's primary, secondary, right? Sure. So a lot of kids just don't have just the one diagnosis. Speech delay, okay, great. Separation anxiety, yes. Nonverbal ADHD, okay. Mental health diagnosis, yes. Let's see, I'm looking neurodivergent, love it. All right, so this definitely helps me on making sure that I highlight some of the resources of information, because visual supports is a very large subject. All right, next one. Speaking of visual supports, what comes to mind when you hear this? Pictures. Yes, that's definitely the big one, right? And pictures could be photographs, right? I'm assuming people are just kind of using that as a blanket term in the sense of symbols, pictures. But I see other people put videos. Yep, flashcards. That's right. Communication boards. Good. Picture charts. Awesome. Technology. Yes. Some people don't think of technology with visual support, so that's great. Visual reminders, prompts. Awesome. It looks like we have a lot of people who are already using some specific visual support. So you're just here to get to that next level. Oh, PECs. So yes, there is a big overlap, if we had a Venn diagram, between visual supports and communication supports, right? And we can talk a little bit about that too, just to identify. All right, and then what questions do you have in coming to this presentation? So I'm going to just look at this really quick, and I'm sure that I'm sure you had more than one question. So my hope was that somebody else might put your question out there, your additional questions out there. Okay, how to communicate better. Okay, how can I better engage? All right. All populations. Great. How to make and create. Definitely, we're going to go over that. Whether other visual resources available for nonverbals. Okay, great. How to differentiate between ASD and other similar diagnoses. Okay. Specific visual interventions. How to get children interested in visual supports. Okay, we'll definitely, I'll talk about that. And then more, okay. We'll talk about all these things. I just wanted to make sure there's some slides that I can go a lot of different directions with, right? The information. So just to make sure I don't go in the wrong direction, this will help me be able to stay focused. Okay. And I believe that was the last one. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for participating in that. And if you want to add anything later, if you're just joining us, um, otherwise, we will get started. Okay. Well, you can understand why this is called creating a bridge to understanding with visual supports, because really that's the reason why you will use visual supports. And it looks like a lot of you already know that. As I was introduced, my name is Enid Hurtado. I currently work for the Kentucky Autism Training Center. My background is as a special education teacher, K through 12. MSD, so moderate to severe supports, although a lot of my experience is in inclusive settings. So that, as you know, that's pretty much supporting everybody in a general ed classroom, even if it's not specifically for them, it ends up being for them. In my position now, I support a lot in the community as well. And on a personal note, my father had a massive stroke where he lost his ability to speak, and he had apraxia as well. And so I have a lot of personal experience, 13 years of providing visual supports for understanding and for communication. So, and I also used to, I was a trainer for some time with Toby Dynavox, or board maker, as some people say, I like to refer to. So visual supports is my thing. I love them. All right. So today we will talk about the why, when, and how visual supports. You're going to see a lot of different examples of different types of visual supports. So get ready to write some, some notes. This PowerPoint presentation is going to be in a resource folder that you will have access to. So don't worry about typing or writing down any information that you see on the slides, but just any additional information, or maybe you want to star and remind yourself to revisit any type of specific type of visual support. And then we'll talk about designing a visual support that will meet the needs of your specific clients. And in addition, I will talk about how to get the students to, or your clients to use the visual supports, and then also that fading part as well. Okay, speaking of, here is a link to the resource folder. Oh, and on my slide that I had a URL. So this link will be, in fact, you know what? I can put the link in the chat window right now because I have it right here. All right, so I'm going to get the link, put it in the chat window. So for those of you who would like to start looking at it, because I know that many of you are multitaskers like myself. So if somebody doesn't give me something to do, I will find something else to do while I'm listening and doing other stuff. Let's see. It doesn't look like I can put it in the chat window. So let's see. Well, trying to think what's the best way to get that to you. All right. Well, I can tell you that I'm showing you right now the visual supports in here. Let me get to this. So when you access your resource folder, you're going to find some handouts on how to plan visual supports, how to make sure they're working well, even implementation steps. So you will be guided step by step. For those of you who are working with toddlers, there's a whole packet on providing visual supports for toddlers. For those of you who were wondering how to teach and how to fade out the prompting of visual supports, there is a chart right here for you. And then there's just some other stuff. First Then is a huge one, is a huge type of visual support that a lot of people will use. Some people find it challenging at first to teach students how to do it. So there's an instruction sheet. And then there's some other stuff that I will talk about. But then you have your handout of the PowerPoint as well. In addition to that, you have some samples of visuals that I will talk about, so you can look through there. And then I also included some templates. So these might be Word documents that you can download, because a lot of people, just want to get a start. So you can download, and there's more in here. It's just not scrolling down, but there's more in here that you can just download and just input your own information in there. And I can put more in there if there's anything else that pops up during this presentation. Okay. All right, with that said, now that you know all the resources that you will have available to you, we are going to talk about visual supports. So the first thing we're going to ask is why? Why use visual supports? Well, it sounds like this group is pretty knowledgeable about using certain visual supports. So just know that if you can relate to any of these statements, you have clients that are always late, that are easily fatigued or overwhelmed, that need directions repeated over and over, that always needs to know what's happening next. They're always asking you that, even though you just said it, right? And you just answered that question. Meltdowns with transitions, irritated by change, interrupts constantly, maybe wanting to know what's happening, or it's about information about what you just said, any of these and more, right? If you have clients that this happens with, then they probably need a visual support to present the information that they're asking about. If it's with easily fatigued or overwhelmed, if they have some auditory challenges and they're really trying to pay attention, and they're trying, especially with autism, they're trying to block out all the other distractions because their brain doesn't, sometimes their brain, remember, it's a spectrum. So we don't, I don't want to say all individuals with autism are like this, but especially the younger they are, they have a challenging time with filtering out other distractions, other inputs, right? So it's really hard for them sometimes to concentrate. And that's when they're at their calm and alert, and they're awake and they've eaten and they're having a great day. So you place not sleeping last night, not eating, being very upset about something, being sensorily overwhelmed by something in the room. You put those things, and they're going to even have less of a capacity to really be able to focus on what they're supposed to be doing, what the expectations are, and how to be successful. So it's really, really taxing on them. It's really fatiguing for them to be able to really focus on the words and try to figure out what it is that you want them to do to be successful. So that's where you get that easily fatigued and overwhelmed. That's also where you can get sometimes the meltdowns with transitions, because they don't remember what's coming next. Okay. Following directions, it may be too many steps. And again, remember, they're constantly trying to filter out all this other input. So when you see a child is having challenges in an area and it's it happens over and over again, your best bet is to put it into a visual support. Okay. Even if it just happens, they're having a bad day, right? We all know when we see a client or a student that this is going to be a challenging session with them. I would just automatically think, okay, what exactly do I want them to know? And what do they need to know to be successful? And you just start writing it down in very concrete language that they understand. So this is a little bit of what I just said. So visual supports are that bridge to understanding of information that they don't seem to be embracing. So don't think that you have to provide visual supports for everything. It's just for the information that doesn't seem to be easily understood. Okay. With communication supports, okay, so I'm going to input this right there, because I usually keep communication supports out unless people ask about it. And it looks like some of you are interested in learning how communication supports feed into this. So visual supports are part of the communication road, I guess you could say, of the receptive language, right? So visual supports also, because you're putting what you're saying and what the expectations are into concrete words that don't change and don't rely on emotion, then they also help with the receptive processing, receptive language. Okay. It also can help, as many of you identified, it can also help with the expressive, right? So having some type of visual support that prompts the type of responses that you're looking for can help a student remember what they're supposed to say. It also can help reduce their anxiety, because for a lot of students, they have either challenges with initiating conversation or initiating a request. There's a stereotypical belief that they have a hard time asking for help, which usually it communicates into because they need help, and so they don't actually use their words for help, and then they ask it in a more challenging behavior, right? But it's actually the initiation of asking or responding to anything. Okay, so having that communication support of typical responses during the session or during a certain period of time may help the student a lot in being in a couple different ways, reducing the anxiety, and also knowing what are the expected responses to either questions, or if they need, or things like I need help, yes or no, could be just like those typical responses that we would need available for any situation that we're in. So So that's the type of visual supports that we're talking about. And remember, the visual supports, the goal is independence. So you do want to fade them out to a point. There are some visual supports that independence just means using the visual supports independently. That's it. Think about communication supports, right? They're going to use the expressive communication supports if they're nonverbal for the rest of their lives. So we don't want to fade that out. So it just depends on what those are. Okay. So I think some of it is what I already talked about. So we'll just keep on going. Here we go. Across the lifespan, like we said, with the communication supports, also schedules, calendars, right? Those are going to be needed in a lifespan. I bet many of you are attending this session because it popped up on your calendar on your on whatever is it Outlook or Google Calendar, whatever platform that you use. It popped up, right? So scheduling is going to be for the rest of life. So you're really teaching them life skills as well, and not only understanding what to do in that moment. So here are some visual supports that we use on an everyday basis, right? From what I was talking about, the Outlook calendar, to even knowing what door to go to use the restroom, to looking at recipes, right? How many of you look at the pictures? I mean, we live in a very visually supported society. It's part of our culture. So in addition to it really helping individuals with autism and other types of disabilities, it's very helpful for everyone. It's providing them with life skills that they're going to use for the rest of their life because we use them every day. We were just not taught explicitly, maybe, or if we were, it was probably part of a lesson at school. But there's some things that, like the bathroom or looking at the Outlook schedule or some things that we really just figured out on our own. So if there's visual supports that they're not sure how to use for the students, I hear that sometimes people will say, "Oh, well, I use the visual support, but they're not looking at it." Well, you got to make it meaningful. And we'll talk about more about that when creating. Okay. So why use visual supports? I think I kind of explained some of these already in my little tangent. So it takes less energy to complete. Think about recipes, right? Think about when how many of you watch YouTube videos, right? To learn how to do something or fix something. Okay. So figuring out on your own without the visual supports, a lot more energy, a lot more frustration, right? But having a visual support, whether that be a list, like a recipe on a paper, or the YouTube video, is going to reduce the anxiety and motivate you to complete the task. Okay. So again, here we go, decreases frustration and unwanted behaviors because especially with the communication supports, not only is it reducing frustration, answering a lot of questions, right? They can look at it as much as they want to answer their questions, but also for the initiation aspect, you provided some expressive communication supports to be able for them to use a visual to initiate and ask questions or respond to your questions. Focus on key ideas, right? Lots of input is coming in, remember, and sometimes they have a hard time filtering it out. So if you just focus on concrete key ideas, especially when it comes to a schedule or key ideas that you want them to take away from a lesson, or when they're leaving, what did we talk about today? That will make a huge difference for them because then they will definitely remember, they'll definitely be able to process it, and then they'll be able to be successful in either implementing it or being able to talk about it or whatever your expectation is. On task behavior, yes, because now they know what they're supposed to be doing and how to do it, right? As long as the student or the client, student slash client, knows how to be successful, they'll stay on task, right? They'll stay engaged, right? That's the engagement part. If they don't know what they're supposed to be doing, they're getting frustrated, anxious, they don't know how to respond, they don't have the communication support, an alternative way to respond, even if they are verbal, okay? Even if they are verbal, they need those communication supports. Then they're going to find some other way to engage if they're not sure how they're supposed to be engaged in, or how it's supposed to be engaged for you. And then reduce anxiety, add structure to the day. Individuals with with autism or autistic individuals, really benefit and flourish in structure. And I would say so do a lot of young kids, right? I think everybody does. We just, the older we get, we just have better coping skills. We learn flexibility, resilience. We learn how to deal with changes. But when they're young, and if you have a diagnosis of autism or ID or even TBI, right? They need that structure really helps them to make sure that they're successful. Otherwise, they're always feeling a little bit anxious and or maybe a lot anxious because they're not really sure what they're supposed to be doing. And then the review, okay? And so you see a picture of the shopping list, which a lot of us know. Okay, so we're gonna transition now into identifying three different types. Okay, and this information on how I'm presenting it is based off of the NCAEP report, which is the report that identifies all the evidence-based practices that have been found to be the most effective with individuals with autism. I included the whole list because as you look at this list, you're going to see that that's a lot of practices that you probably use with all your clients, right? Modeling, prompting, reinforcement, task analysis. Okay. You see the last one only because this is in alphabetical order, visual supports, which, as you probably can assume, a lot of visual supports is part of almost every one of these evidence-based practices. Okay, so let's look at, okay, so NCAP breaks the visual supports down into three categories. And I included this in your folder. So when you look at your folder, you're going to see the report. It's very user friendly, which is why I included it. But you'll see that. And then there's also some handouts in there that will expand on these three categories and how to develop them, and a lot of the questions that all of you asked. Okay, so visual boundaries. When they say visual boundaries, they're talking about literally using furniture, okay, or placing tape on the desks or on the floors, as you can see right here, even around where they should be sitting or standing, just being able to make it very clear how their setting is structured. Okay, where expectations are. So you can use different colors, you can put words with those boundaries, but the more you structure your setting, the less anxiety the individuals are going to feel, especially if it's a new environment, okay, or something has changed. Some people are going to be more, some kids or adults or teenagers are going to be a little bit more flexible than others, but it doesn't hurt to set the environment up as structured as possible using furniture, tape, rugs, objects that designate certain things, like that symbolize certain areas, where something's going to happen, to help them understand how their environment works, how the setting works, and where they need to go when. Okay. All right, here are some other examples of that as well. Even walking down the hallway, right? Some people, they'll put the line, some people will put like even little steps if they have some type of mascot. Oh, here's the lines right there. So any of those, okay? The next one is visual cues. And I would ask right now how many of you use boundary tapes like that, but I know the chat's not on, so that's okay, because I pretty much know the answer. I think that some of you do, just by common sense or just instinct, but then some of you are like, oh my gosh, I can easily do that. That would totally solve blank, right? So yeah, so write it down, write those ideas down right now, okay? Because if you're anything like me, I have every intention to implement or follow up when I'm talking about or hearing about it. If I don't write it down, after this presentation, something else will replace that. So write that down, what you're going to implement very easily, to help structure that environment. Okay, visual cues. Now that's a big category, okay, as you can see. But that's also one of the easiest. It's one of the ones that you can do on the fly, like right in the moment. So you see the confusion on somebody's face, or you see the frustration or anxiety, or like I mentioned in the examples, they're saying things over and over and over again, okay, this is when you want to use a visual cue. So that can look like a post-it note, okay? It could be writing down visual instructions. Or if they're young and they still need the pictures, this is something you plan for next time, okay? You're like, note to self, I need to have, at the beginning of the session, I'm going to, have these cues to remind the student what to do during certain things so that they're not asking or they're not anxious, especially when you're working with a group of kids, right? You can't get to everyone all at once. So when you know the students, or really it benefits all students. So when you have visual cues, letting your clients or students know what to do when, it really, really helps out. So one of these things, as you can see, is videos. Okay, so I mentioned the YouTube videos before. You can record a really quick video and it will help a student. They can watch it very quickly right before, so they know like what the whole entire process is going to look like. Say you're doing an activity. Okay, this might be in case of an activity, and you show them what's going to happen in the activity. But the video is like 1 minute long because you just show all the different steps, and then you show the outcome of the activity, and that's maybe all the student needs is just that really quick video right before. So lots of different ways that you can provide visual cues. So let's look at some more of the concrete ones, from visual graphs to reminding them what they can do when they're upset. Choice boards are huge. Okay, so you may say, well, I give my students choices all the time, because I hear that a lot. Okay, or when I'm observing, I see that service providers are giving the choices. Okay, do you want this or this? But it's all verbal, right? So if you have a student who is still not responding to the choices, or they choose something and it's not something they wanted, it could be that they misunderstood. They could be that they were processing on the first choice you gave when you gave the second one. And so they actually were choosing the first one. So there's a lot of things that can get lost in the verbal offer of choices. Okay, so providing a visual of choices eliminates all of that confusion. Okay, and you can point, and the recommendation is that the less verbal explanation that you use, the better. Okay, when providing these type of choices. Let's see. Okay, yeah, go on. Some other examples, for adults, or here's a cue card, right? Here's another type of cue card. Oops, sorry about that. I'm going to do some work that might be hard. That is okay. I don't have to know all the answers. Today I will get A pluses just for trying my best. So that perfectionism does run in a lot of students, okay, because it's a very defined world for them. And so putting notes like that, like some affirmation things that you tell them all the time, that they still get anxious, may help them. Okay, make phone call to mom. So again, any information. Here are some other types of visual cues that have been used. Some of them may look very familiar to you. I did put a 5-point scale example in there, in your folder as well. Here's for a whole group of people. So just anything, again, anything that you find people that some of your clients get confused by, or can't remember, or ask over and over again, that's what you want to provide the visual cues. Okay, so you might have seen some ideas, heard some ideas right now, write it down. Okay, write them down right now, something that you want to follow up after this. Visual schedules. Okay, so we talked about how we all use schedules all through our life. Uh, some are more obvious than others, and some can be very simple, and some can be very complex. But the whole idea is to predict what's going to happen, right? So we know that autistic individuals really do better, more successful when they know what's going to happen, okay, during a certain period of time. It also helps them with transitions, okay, because they know when they're going to change to the next um, activity, to the next classroom, to the next setting, whatever it is, the next person, whatever the next is, okay. It's that anticipation of not knowing what's next that can just derail them in a way from even completing the task that they're on right now because they're so worried about what's next. Okay. So that's where visual schedules come in. Now, what can that look like? Um, well, there's a lot of different ways we can create a visual schedule. We can use objects. Okay, some young kids. Some of you said you work with young kids. Some kids can will need the objects themselves. They're not ready for pictures yet. Okay, so if you have a child where you're saying, well, especially those of you who work with early ed or toddlers, you're like they don't know what that symbol means. Well, then you may need to use an object schedule, like put just a representation of that object that's meaningful to them. And I think that's the key thing of visual schedules or any of these visual supports is that it needs to be as meaningful as possible. It has to be able to meet a need of theirs. Okay, so objects, technology can be on a screen, photographs and drawings, and words. Okay, and just know though, because I was looking up visual supports for adults, like trying to find stories about, and I'll show you one towards the end of this presentation where an adult tried all these different types of schedules, like Outlook, Google Calendar, a physical calendar, and it just really wasn't doing it for her. And so she went back to what did used to work for her in school growing up, and that's what the visual schedules. So visual schedules don't always go away. Okay, you don't want to always transition somebody out of that. But if they do prefer words, some kids are hyperlexic. They don't. I know kindergartners, preschoolers who don't even like pictures. They just want the words because the words are what is meaningful to them. Okay, so again, it's whatever is meaningful to them. It's still a visual. Then words it is, and it's the words that have meaning for them, right? It's not a vocabulary lesson, so just use the words that is meaningful for them. Length, it could be a first. That's where first then comes in sometimes. You could put after you teach a first then board, which I have instructions on how to do that in your folder. It could just be, we're doing this now, and then we're doing this next. Or it could be, we're doing this then, and then we're going to do your preferred activity. It just depends on where you're at or where the student is at in being able to build that endurance to do multiple things. Or it could be, it could be 10 items long. It just depends on how much experience and endurance the student has to be able to follow the schedule. It may be something they carry with them, or it could be something that's on a wall that they go back and they change it every single time or cross it off a list if they're in a general education classroom and it's something that they just have on top of the desk right next to them. Location, kind of what I just said right now. And I think the last one was initiation and transition, right? How do they start the schedule and how do they transition to the next thing? Like who's going to tell them to change it? Okay, so what's the prompt? Where is it? What is that format? So what is the format of the whole using the schedule? That's something you really got to think about before introducing it. Because if you don't know, then the student won't know either, right? I mean, I know that seems very obvious when I say it, but in the moment, it seems like something that you would assume that they know, but they don't because you haven't showed them how to do it or haven't told them. So there are some examples. Here's an object schedule, and it can go from top to bottom or left to right. I think some people prefer left to right because it mimics the format of reading, but it's not necessary because in the world, we also use top to bottom, so it can be either way. So here are some examples. And again, it can, in a general education, if the student reads, then it could be for the whole entire classroom. Okay, that's a big thing that when I go to different schools or when I work with different service providers in the schools, they don't realize that they can put the schedule up for everyone. It's just a matter of when you use it, just make sure that you're pointing to it, that you actually interact with the visual support. Because if you don't interact with the visual support, if the child or the client doesn't interact with any of these visual supports, then it's just noise. It's just noise on their desk, noise on their wall. Okay, so just make sure that is the key thing, is to interact and use this Just like all those apps on your phone, right? If you don't interact with them, they're just another little picture on your phone that means nothing to you and actually is more distracting than helpful. So just keep that in mind when you use visual supports. Okay, so how do we plan? Okay, so I think I've kind of gone over a lot of things that go into the planning now because I've kind of been building up to that. So first, we don't provide visual supports for everything. So pick the information that needs to be bridged, right? What do they need bridged for understanding? What format? Because you're teaching the format first. So is it a boundary? Is it a cue? Or is it a schedule? And when you pick the cue and the schedule and the boundary, make sure it's consistent. That it's something they know. If you use a new format of a cue, a boundary, or a schedule, then make sure they know how it works from the beginning to the end. How they start it, how they move things around, or how they look at it. What are they supposed to do when things are done? Or what are they supposed to do when they look at that visual support, and then how it ends, okay, when they stop using it. Pick which one is best. Objects, photos, symbols, words, okay. I put observe individual with a magazine. If you have young children, show them a book with that has like the objects in them. See what they gravitate towards. That was always my way of figuring out how to create my visual supports for my students. Is I would give them something visual, age appropriate, or I put a bunch of different visual everyday objects out, something that they probably have at home or something similar at home. And I put a bunch of things out and see what they gravitate towards. What are they the most comfortable? What's the most meaningful to them? And that's what I would start with. Okay. Because they know how that works. That's interesting to them. It's beneficial to them. Decide whether it needs to be stationary or portable. So that, is it on the wall? Is it carried around? Is it on a lanyard? That's a big one right now for me. Because we see so many times, especially if they carry it around and it's not in a folder, like in a general ed or where the kid carries a folder around or from class to class, and even then they forget it, right? It's you wearing the lanyard, okay? It's you wearing the lanyard, especially if you're in a session and you can just point to it, okay? If it's something simple like that. How will the student interact with it? Okay, we talked about that. And how are you going to teach it? You're going to model it and you're going to reinforce. So that's where communication supports and visual supports use the same technique. Okay, you're not just going to give it to the student or place it for the student and then expect for them to know, or give them instructions and then wait for them to use it. You will need to model how to use it. Okay. Modeling, one of the evidence-based practices, something everybody does in teaching everything else. You also use it when teaching the visual supports. That's why I say if you have visual supports in your setting, make sure you're using it at the same time as the student. You're modeling how to use it. You're giving reinforcement with behavior-specific praise. You may have like a token system or even a high five. Just so that they know, especially individuals with autism, because they're not always sure what they're getting reinforced with. So you may need to make it specific. Oh, I love the way you use your schedule, or I like how you looked at that list to know what was next. What it is that you want to reinforce and see them doing over and over and over again. All right, so I kind of mentioned this a little bit, visual noise. Okay, remember, if you're not interacting with it, if it's not important for the student's learning, it's just noise in the environment. Now, this classroom is very, very bright and colorful and fun, but there is a lot of noise in this classroom, okay? So, which may be fun for some kids, right? But for kids with autism or individuals with autism, remember, they may have a harder time, especially the younger they are, being able to filter out all that input and understand and trying to figure out what's important to pay attention to and what's not, and then processing the information. What are they supposed to do with it? So if you're in your environment, if you can keep anything on the walls or on your desks just to what is they basically need, that will help in creating a successful environment, and it will make your visual supports more powerful. Okay. because they know when they're walking in. Remember, visual supports can be the environment, the boundaries. They know that when they're looking at different parts of the room, or even any cue cards or anything, that it's something meaningful to interact with. So it helps them be able to really focus on the information and less input and distraction. And so it sets them up for success. Okay. I also included this. This was not part of the original one, but when I was looking at this before I was about to start, I looked at this, and this was a little overwhelming to me because there's so many different types of visual support. So if you even felt overwhelmed by this slide when I showed it to you earlier, you had to like kind of take a step back and then look at each one individually. That tells you that even for us who have so much experience looking at PowerPoints and different examples, sometimes we also, it's when there's no format, no expectation to a visual support, it takes us a little bit time to process the information. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of validate anybody who had that experience, because I did when I first looked at it. And of course, when I was creating it, I was just putting examples at the time. I didn't see it as a whole. And so just know, just keep that in mind when you're creating. And then some tips for using visual supports. Remember, it must be accessible. I say that because sometimes I'll walk into a place and I'll see that they have a visual support. Say, for example, a big one is behavioral expectations, right? So when clients, students have a really challenging behavior, and that's why I'm going in there, is to find out, what's going on and make any recommendations. The first thing I look for is behavioral expectations. Like, do the students know what the behavioral expectations are for that setting, or during that time? Like, say, for if it's table time, what are the expectations when they sit at the table? Now, that may sound very obvious to some people, but again, for individuals with autism or autistic individuals, they may need to be reminded, right? It's just a reminder, it's just validation that this is what you do to be successful in that environment. And so if you have students that have challenging behavior, the first thing that I would make sure I have is very concrete, descriptive behavioral expectations. Okay. And when you have them up like that, the reason why I thought of that with accessible is because not only are they posted, but they're posted in a place where not only can they see them, but you can point to it. They can be accessed, right? You can access it by pointing to it when you're reminding them about it, so it becomes a cue. You can point to it when you give that behavior specific praise, like praising them that they followed these expectations. It's also and that helps with them learning that they need to look at this behavior expectation list and to know how to behave. So this is what you're looking for. This is what's going to help them be successful. I think that for those of you who use communication supports, that the same thing also applies to communication supports, but even more so, right? Those communication supports need to be anywhere the student's going to be. So if it's PEC that you're using or communication boards, then that book or the device or the iPad, whatever it's on, needs to be with the student at all times. If you are going to provide just a really like a communication strip on a table that you're using that has yes, no, I don't understand, I need help, just a really 5 or 6 different phrases that will help with initiation and response to any questions that you may have. Just make sure that that is throughout the room so that they know that that communication strip is available to them whenever they need it. All right. That's also a good thing to have on your lanyard as a teacher, or as a therapist, or as a parent, anybody. So if there's common phrases that will answer your questions, or they're phrases that the student needs to be able to initiate and ask for help or bathroom or drink or yes or no, then having a lanyard laminated or in a pocket and having that around your neck may help the student be able to communicate with you better. And it will also help with a lot of those challenging behaviors that you may be experiencing with them, because they have no other way to communicate in the moment and they need your attention right now. Of course, do that with with safety in mind, because I know some people always say, well, I don't want to put anything around my neck. I get it. So always use that with safety in mind, and maybe come up with something else. This goes along with consistently, right? If you have it in all different settings, if it's always available, then it's going to be easier to use it consistently. And again, having that availability is going to enable them to be able to have the communication supports both receptively and expressively, and also understand how to be successful in the environment, know what's going to happen next, what the directions are, and also if they don't remember what you just said, they know where to look to remember or to understand what you said. Um, if it's faded out, remove it. Okay, that's that noise issue. Okay, so if there is a visual support that you're no longer using with any of your clients, take it down. Don't get rid of it because you probably might need it again, but take it down because again, it just becomes noise and a distraction. And then remember, some visual supports are not faded, right? Think about the ones that you use today in your life to even just be here in the presentation, or to have the rest of your day go successfully. And those are the ones that are more life skills than they are in addition to visual supports. So now we're back to identifying those clients that have these needs that we mentioned. I was going to have you type it in the chat, but don't worry. I know that you guys have been writing down tips and ideas that you wanted to follow up on. And let's see. What I'm going to do is we have some resources, and this will be available to you in your PowerPoint references. And let me see if I can get that link in the chat. Otherwise, because you don't have access to that folder. All
Actually,
right.
Heidi was able to make a bit link for it.
Okay. Okay, great. So,
So that's been posted several times in the chat
oh,
while you were
great.
talking, Enid.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, and so that resource folder is there. Is the PowerPoint in that resource folder, or is it just the resource folder? I just need to know if I need to send out the PowerPoint to
Nope,
everybody.
everything is in there. A PDF of this PowerPoint is in there. So everything that we've talked about and more is in there. And then if there's anything anybody would like, just email us and we'll be able to provide that for you.
And again, just a reminder that we did record the training, and it will be uploaded to KATC's YouTube channel, which Heidi did post the link to the Kentucky Autism Training Center website and how to access that. Please do give us a few days to be able to get that uploaded, hopefully by next week. And again, as a reminder, I did post the evaluation link. You must fill this out and complete it to get CEU credit. You will check the box for the Aetna training series, and it will prompt you to put your name and email. If you have trouble using that link, please email me personally at polka@aetna.com. I put that in the chat, and I can send you a Word copy of the evaluation to fill out, and I will ensure that KATC gets it back. With that being said, Enid, this was a great presentation. I know we could talk about it more than an hour, of course. I know it's a lot of information to unpack in an hour. So your resource folder, we all love resources. And so the fact that you've provided that to us is fantastic. So thank you. I love the lanyard idea as well, too. So always learning new things. And yes, Candace, if you're an Aetna person, we are blocked to the Google sites. And so I know
Oh,
that we have trouble getting the resources here at Aetna. But so I don't know if there's another way to send that.
all the resources.
Yeah, yeah.
What you could do is access that link if you have a person. If you have, I think
Mm-hmm,
because you have to have a personal
mm-hmm.
email if you're blocked. I will work on that and I will try to find an alternative resource. And then can I send that to you?
Yeah, and
Like,
Candace, I know what we've had to do in the past is send that link like to ourselves in a personal email and open it
yeah.
that way too. So, but Candace, if you need the evaluation form, please email me or send me a message in Teams, and I'll get that sent to you. Um,
I just wanted to mention, so lanyards, like I said, is my big thing right now because it's so accessible. I wish I would have thought about it a long time ago, like when I was teaching a long time ago. Because, and here's, this is a picture of the lanyards. Okay. So it has tabs and stuff like that. You can put anything on it, but somebody made it already, and made it accessible for everyone. So this is a zip file. So when you get in here, lanyard cue cards, you just double click on it. Okay. It's going to pop up like this. It says open with zip extractor. Just click on there, and then the files will pop up. There's oh, I don't, you don't want that. Don't worry. That I don't know why that popped up. Um, you don't need to do. It's probably because it's a little slow. Usually goes right past that. Oh, here we go. See, there it goes. Probably because I double clicked on it. But when you open this, you'll see that there's a lot of files in there. There's large ones. So if you want large pictures, and I love people I know who like the large ones are ones who work with groups. So you can like hold it up as you're speaking. I know I said that sometimes you don't want to speak, but that's with an individual, like, who's really struggling. But sometimes they just use it with the whole group, and then they'll show it again quietly to the person who may be struggling. Um, there's like there's this ring template or just smaller versions of that. Okay, and then you can always make your own as well, of course, and just put it on a lanyard. And then the only other thing that I wanted to show you, let me see if it's on there. No, I may have closed it. Okay. There's an adult with autism. She did a blog where she uses visual supports with pictures all through her house. Okay. So what I can do is I'll put the link inside that folder to it. It's a really great blog. She uses AAC, even though she's verbal and she's literate. She uses AAC because of what I was talking to you about with the challenge time. Like her anxiety is very high when she's out and about because of all the input. And so the AAC helps her be able to communicate with other people when she can't find her words or when she can't initiate. So, and she does a great job of describing what that's like and like how she came to that realization and what she uses. So I will put that in there for you to check out later. And that's all I got for you.
And thank you for bringing up AAC. Next Wednesday, we do have another presentation from 12 to 1 from KATC about embedding low-tech AAC tools into everyday opportunities. And Heather Page Alger is going to be the one presenting that. So again, feel free to email me. I'm going to put my name and email in the chat if there's something you didn't receive today. And again, thank you all for attending. Enid, thank you for being here. It was amazing. Thank you. And everybody have a great day. And don't forget to fill out your evaluation forms.
All right. Take care, everyone. And thank you for everything that you.
Thank you for watching this video. Please take a moment to complete this short feedback form by scanning the QR code or typing the URL into your web browser. Thank you.